Welcome to the third module of the Eating Disorder 101 workshops. In the third module, we'll be talking about diet culture, weight bias, and how to offer support to a loved one suffering from an eating disorder. My name is Sarah. I'm a registered dietitian with the Windsor Essex Community Health Center and also work with the Windsor Essex Intensive Outpatient Program for eating disorders. The Windsor Essex Intensive Outpatient Program is a treatment program intended for individuals who have an eating disorder who are 16 years and older. It offers individual sessions with social workers, dietitians, and nurse practitioners, as well as groups that provide psychoeducation on eating disorders and meal support groups where you can have challenging food and meals in a supportive group environment. You'll also hear from Mackenzie, a registered social worker. On today's agenda, we'll be talking about what diet culture is, why it's so dangerous, how to support a loved one with an eating disorder, and we'll also provide you some additional resources that provide you some useful information. So before we get started, it's important to note that this workshop is intended for individuals with eating disorders or disordered eating, parents or caregivers, or healthcare professionals looking to learn more. This workshop is for educational purposes only. This workshop is not intended to substitute any medical, nutritional, or mental health advice. This workshop is intended to provide general resources and information on eating disorders and disordered eating. This workshop is not meant to address individual concerns or provide individual advice. Some of the topics covered today may be difficult to hear. If you are in need of immediate support, please contact the Community Crisis Center of Windsor's 24/7 helpline at 519-973-4435, or you can access the National Eating Disorder Information Center live chat or phone line at www.nedic.ca. Let's start by talking about what diet culture is. Diet culture is the belief that appearance and body size is much more important than our overall well-being. It involves a set of rules and restrictions around eating. It promotes weight bias and weight stigma. And it essentially puts our bodies on this hierarchy in such a way that thin bodies are praised and idolized in today's society. Although diets are quite normal in today's world, diet culture is full of red flags. As I mentioned before, it involves rules and restrictions around eating. It promises changes that are not sustainable in the long term. It can also spread weight discrimination and weight stigma. It promotes misinformation without any evidence to back it up. It encourages unhealthy views on food and exercise, and it can also lead to long-term physical and psychological consequences. So you've heard me talk about weight discrimination a couple times so far. Weight discrimination can be defined as the conscious and unconscious bias towards someone based on their body, weight, shape, and size. You may also see it as weight bias, social stigma, anti-fat, body shaming, fatmisia, and weight stigma. It's important to note that individuals living in a larger body may face significant barriers to equality in workplaces, schools, healthcare, relationships, and other aspects of life. Diet culture can impact us all. It can start by creating stereotypes, shame, and stigma, which can then lead to harassment from colleagues and peers and barriers to support, which can then ultimately result in poor self-worth and poor self-image. I try to caution people to be aware that diet culture can be very sneaky. Dieting for weight loss has become a taboo, and the diet industry is catching on to this pretty quickly. So what they're doing now is taking the same old faulty diets, wrapping it in this new packaging, and presenting it as wellness, when we know in fact it's not really wellness. So far we've discussed what diet culture is and have talked about weight discrimination. I'm sure at this point you're probably wondering what normal eating looks like. Normal eating involves eating when you're hungry and up until you're satisfied. It's about honoring your cravings when you do have those cravings for the foods that you enjoy. It's about feeling hungry and not feeling shame or guilt about that hunger. Normal eating is making thoughtful and unrestricted choices. It's also variable and flexible. Normal eating should be only one aspect of your day, in the sense that you shouldn't be thinking about it all day or preoccupied with the thought of food. It's about choosing foods you enjoy and trusting your body. Normal eating is about celebrating your identity through food, and this includes having foods that are normal in your culture, or normal in social settings.
Let's learn how we can support ourselves or someone that we care about that's dealing with an eating disorder. The first thing that you can do is educate yourself. There are a lot of myths about eating disorders. If you listen to our first workshop, you'll remember one that was discussed. It's that eating disorders are a choice, and we know that they're not. So we encourage you to get curious and learn things for yourself. You may seek out actual science and reputable sources. That might come from your care team, your medical doctor, a nurse practitioner, a social worker, or maybe it's going online and hunting for some fabulous podcasts that you really resonate with. This shows to your loved one that you care and want to learn about eating disorders, and it can also create space to challenge existing beliefs that you might have about the way your body should look, the way you should treat it or fuel it. And this process of unlearning can actually be really helpful and create space for more compassionate, informed care. The next way that we can offer support is to avoid blame. No single person is responsible for developing an eating disorder. Instead, they're complex illnesses that are influenced by genetic, biochemical, psychological, social, and environmental factors. And we find that assigning responsibility, blame, or intention about the topics featured on the screen aren't helpful. So we want to encourage you to trust your instincts, and of course you can express your concerns about these topics because eating disorders certainly can influence your loved one's appearance or food choices or body shape or even their feelings. But coming from a judgmental place can kind of further stigmatize or isolate your loved one, and it might be difficult for them to get help. One thing that's important to talk about is caregiver blame. Sometimes with this diagnosis, it's like a floodgate for guilty feelings. It might sound like, what did I do wrong? I'm such a terrible parent. How could I let this happen? And guilt can sometimes be rooted in wanting to better protect and take care of our loved ones. But if it runs rampant, it can turn into shame, and that's super immobilizing. And it can sound like I'm bad, I can't do this, what's wrong with me? And it can really prohibit us from being proactive in treatment and connecting with our loved ones and getting them the support that they need. So our second way that you can offer support is not to label. Eating disorders love black and white thinking. Using narrow definitions of what is acceptable to eat and what's not, rigid rules, and set limitations further prompts anxiety. We can support our loved ones by not engaging in this kind of talk, and instead coming from the perspective that all food is good food. We can also put this idea into action by not engaging in diets ourselves and changing the subject when diets come up in conversation. Modeling normal eating habits like those that Sarah talked about earlier and plating balanced meals shows that our loved ones that food is safe and essential. The final way that you can offer support to a loved one is to help them connect with some treatment for eating disorders. This might mean looking up options online, talking to them about the intake process, or even driving them to their first appointment. Keeping the door open and asking which ways that we can support can be a really helpful way to be part of their recovery journey. Finally, I want to normalize that recovering from an eating disorder is possible. You're not alone, and there is hope. So we encourage you to speak up, raising those concerns that you might have, following your gut instincts, committing to continued learning. Recovery is often a lifelong journey, and we're going to learn as we go, and that's really normal. And finally, staying connected. There's a whole community of people that support those that have an eating disorder or have an eating disorder themselves, and finding those people, staying connected to them, and building your community. Once you've learned as much as you can about eating disorders, you may feel ready to approach your loved one and to voice your concerns. Remember, this can be a really distressing time for them. They might be feeling a whole variety of ways. They could be defeated by this diagnosis. They might be angry or even become tearful in a conversation. Be patient. Their response doesn't mean that you've made a mistake by, voicing and expressing your concerns. Here are some tips that might help to approach your loved one from a compassionate, non-judgmental place and increase the chance that they'll be receptive. First one is to avoid giving advice, avoid judgment or accusations, state your observations and concern, focus on I statements, ask how you can support, provide resources and keep the door open, and listen openly and be curious.
Thank you so much for watching our third module of our Eating Disorder 101 workshop. If you're looking to learn more, please visit the websites or call the numbers listed in our description below.